Side 2 begins with Velvet Green, a 6-minute long ballad and modern take on classical medieval music and arrangements. It starts off with some nice waltzing between the guitars, bass and keyboards before the drums coming along with the vocals. Ian Anderson sings about walking on velvet green, likely a reference to grass in the fields. At least we now know he touches grass. It then goes on to describe some of the surroundings, like growing Scott pines and lowing cows in the distance, no doubt one of them being the subject of a Pink Floyd album cover. And as the lyrics go on, they start to paint a different picture, with lines such as, "Never a care, with your legs in the air, loving, who's a fancy girl's fancy and an old maid's dream, and I'm tight against the seam." Yeah, much like Hunting Girl, this is also partially about having a nice bit of gumma deep in the woods where no one would be watching or spying. Or could they? However, to be fair though, in a lot of mythologies and folklores, be they English, pagan, Western, Eastern, Asian, Greek, Roman, etc., nature and fertility are often associated with one another and they go hand in hand, so it's not too much of a surprise that, for an album whose themes generally revolve around nature, folk culture and rural life and so on, the band would come up with some rather sexual content. Very cleverly subtle, but still sexual. Another line that's worth of note to demonstrate this is, "August's rare delight may be April's Fool." Aside from being a clear nod to the famous April Fool's prank tradition, when you count the months from August onwards to April, you'd get 9. And generally, from the point of conception onwards to the moment of birth and labour, a woman would be pregnant for generally 9 months. Again, very clever writing here. God is actually thinking. Thinking dirty, maybe, but still thinking. The music itself has some really good shifts as well, ranging from joyful and bouncy to seductive and mysterious, and back again. Both the dominating acoustic and the few electric instruments here really work well in that, especially at the halfway point in between the vocals, where each of the instruments have a moment to play along and almost encourages you to do some kind of weird river dance or something. All in all, Velvet Green is another sweet and tasty folk rock tune that I'd recommend checking out alone. Next is The Whistler, a short and neat track where Ian definitely gets to unleash his inner chord minstrel. This was also made the main single from the album, while the title track was also made a single exclusively in Australia and New Zealand. And I gotta say, like with the title song, this one represents the album quite well, using both traditional and modern instruments with the intent of recreating old medieval folk music, while ultimately making a new sound out of it. And with a title like The Whistler, you'd expect there to be some kind of whistling, and this doesn't disappoint in any way. After a brief emotional intro with some guitars and synths, Ian steps in singing in third person how he'll buy 6 bay mares and 6 golden apples to put on the table. And maybe 5 golden rings and 7 geese a laying as well. He then announces himself as the Whistler and that he has a fife, which the high-pitched sound of a little squeaky woodwind instrument immediately plays in response. A tin whistle of sorts, apparently. Another clever use of call and response, or rather call and demonstrate. He then goes on to say at how he whistles, or rather plays his whistle, on the seventh day, as in on Sunday, possibly having a bit of a religious undertone to it there. However, at the heart of it all, this is more or less a love song about our travelling whistle-playing minstrel wanting to be with a girl he falls in love with in one of the towns he visits, admitting that he's left all sorts of sadness behind him, but he promises to be with her forever. He even offers her to climb on the saddle and whistle along with him, which seems very nice of him, I gotta say. This song alone manages to be both bright and whimsical and atmospheric and emotional all within its runtime, and I gotta give kudos to that alone. After that is Pibroch. Pibroch? Pibroch? P-I-B Rock? Pibroch. Yeah. And in brackets, Cap in Hand. It's the longest track of the album at about 8.5 minutes. And boy, is this an epic one. Wasting nearly no time right away as we first hear the long sliding chords of an electric guitar solo by Martin Barre, which would no doubt give the likes of David Gilmour, Brian May, and Steve Hackett a run for all their money. Then other instruments join in the awesome, such as the fluttering flutes and the clashing drums, before Ian sings again, this time about a light in the house in the wood in the valley. And in the dark, dark valley, there was a dark, dark wood, and in the dark, dark wood, there was a dark, dark house, and in the dark, dark house, there was a dark, dark light. I am such a geek. Anyway, Ian mentions a man who has a thought in his head and carries his dreams like a coat slung over his shoulder. So he'd occasionally put on and wear his dreams if ever it gets really cold. And he also brings love in the cap he's holding. Or rather, it turns out to be chocolates from an old chocolate box. And they turn out to be expired. Then after another verse, we have an extended instrumental section that goes on for about 3.5 minutes. Hey, in prog rock years, that's like 1.25 minutes at most. However, across those 3 minutes, we shift through various fantastical moods, from a calm moment with what sounds like a marimba or glockenspiel, to a dramatic piece between the flute and the guitars, just like the beginning, to a more light and bouncy part with a duet between the flute and an accompanying acoustic guitar, and a serene moment with some organs and synths. And then the vocals return again as Ian narrates about our character looking through a window into the dining room, where he finds 2 skeleton people and their skeleton dog hanging out. Again, I am such a geek. Nah, he just finds a table for 2, lit by candlelight, plus some strange leather boots by the fireplace near the hallway. Realizing what this might mean, he puts on his cap and walks away tragically, as the song eventually comes to a screeching climax. Bit of a bittersweet note, if not an outright downer ending. In the end, this song's about having feelings for a particular person, only to find out that they're already with someone else first. It's a bit of a romantic tragedy in a way, which I don't mind from time to time, even if its ending is a bit downer. But even with all that, it does so well, even at such a long running time. It has very few lyrics, so it has to depend on the music to kind of tell its little story and the feelings of its characters. And to be honest, it accomplishes that very well. I highly approve of that. And so our album ends as we go from the longest song to the shortest, Fire at Midnight. Even shorter than Jack in the Green by a mere second. With that in mind, this could be seen as a kind of epilogue to the album, with the previous song being the proper ending, arguably and debatably. While that one has a bit of a downer ending, this one goes on a more happier and more uplifting note, with Ian singing about finally making it home after so much hardship for most of the day, not unlike the Breathe reprise or Home Again from Pink Floyd's The Dark Side of the Moon. And as someone who's currently in university, I can definitely find this relatable in a way. Then he settles down with his wife near the warm fireplace, feeds their pet dogs, and then they go upstairs where she takes off her makeup and he neatly folds away their clothes. And he even breaks the fourth wall a bit by saying he'll sit and write a love song. This love song. And in the end, it's good to be back home with you. It has that nice, warm, wholesome, living a simple life kind of feeling, which I'm sure a lot of people from older generations would be fond of. Even the music itself works really well in emphasizing that rural, rustic setting. And honestly, I like that too, so this is a good enough song to go out on. And so, that was Songs from the Wood by Jethro Tull, and it's pretty brilliant. They set out to create the perfect mixture of folk and rock music, and they accomplished it. The music and instruments of Jethro Tull really play off each other. Both the modern and traditional instruments like the mandolins, the lute, the organs, the guitars, it just comes together in this perfect balance. And I don't think I can praise that enough alone. If something like Led Zeppelin 4 could be seen as the Sgt. Pepper of the 70s, this album could be, or would be, the Pet Sounds of that decade. Experimental, even a bit avant-garde at times, but for the most part, it's still pretty damn awesome. From the title track to Fire at Midnight to, I don't know, Hunting Girl, it just comes together very nice. Some of it may sound a bit samey to more casual listeners, a lot of the folkiness of it, but if you're really into this kind of music, you'll like this one fine. If you're into classic, traditional folk music, I highly recommend checking out this album, especially if you're living in a nice cottage or out camping in a beautiful forest. You won't be disappointed. Next time, we predict a riot and an angry mob from the Kaiser Chiefs.